you know, Professor Lorsch, this project is about the figure of Marvin Bower and about his genius. And of course, when we speak about Marvin Bower, we speak about McKinsey too.
Sure.
Major world population knows about Harvard Business School, and most business people know who is Marvin Bower. Our project is dedicated to the figure of Marvin Bower and the environment where he became a historical figure. My first question for you as professor from Harvard, in your opinion, how did Harvard influence Marvin Bower and how he influenced Harvard?
Well, that's hard to determine. I mean, you know, he was an MBA student, and I'm sure he was influenced by that, by our faculty at the time. That was a long time ago. And he influenced Harvard in the sense that, first of all, he paid a lot of attention to his alma mater. You know what I mean by an alma mater? Yeah. He was always interested in what we were doing, sometimes critical, sometimes encouraging us. Whenever he came, everybody was terrified because they didn't know what issues he was going to raise. He was, you have to understand that Marvin was a much admired person, but he was what we would say in English, a character. And I think his colleagues at McKinsey would agree with that. And our faculty members and our dean particularly always was wary of Marvin and his arrival, because you never knew what he was going to ask us, what he was going to complain about or encourage us to do. But everybody loved Marvin, and he was a much admired figure.
How do you perceive Marvin Bower, as a consultant, mentor, businessman, or innovator?
He obviously was a great consultant. I mean, if you know the whole history of McKinsey, Mr. McKinsey, who founded the firm, was named to be the chief executive officer of a large department store in Chicago called Marshall Field. When he left, the firm, was still very small, and Marvin was, over the next few years, kind of became the dominant figure in the firm itself. Okay, and I think in many respects, I don't know the early history that well, but I think while Mr. McKinsey set certain standards and policies about how McKinsey should operate, Marvin Bower also was instrumental in the development of those policies and the further growth of the firm.
What do you think was the specificity, uniqueness of McKinsey in the form shaped by Marvin Bower? Because we know that McKinsey today, it is something different. In your opinion, what actually made the firm the leading organization in the consulting sphere?
Well, I think it was, first of all, it was one of the early consulting firms. I'm not sure it was the first, but it was close to being the first. And it was very, very successful, I think, because of the culture that Marvin contributed to. He wasn't alone in that. There were other early partners who also did that. But I think the notion was to create a firm where the real focus was on helping the client. Okay? And it wasn't just a money-making proposition. I mean, obviously they made a lot of money, but what they really were focused on was helping the clients, and they helped clients, and that built a reputation. And I think Marvin sort of set the standards about how you dealt with clients and the notion of the client being the first concern.
During preparing this project, I have read many articles about Marvin Bower and McKinsey, and a number of researchers have compared McKinsey with the Jesuit order. Could you please comment this?
I've seen that. There's a paper that does that, written by somebody in Switzerland, as I recall. The similarity is they're committed to the institution. But to think about McKinsey as a religious institution, I think, is a little far-fetched. But, I think the similarity for sure is that the people who, the consultants who became partners at McKinsey had a huge commitment to the institution. And I don't know many Jesuits. I've only met one in my whole life, but I assume he was committed to the Jesuit order as well. But that's the similarity I see. I think it's a little, I wouldn't pursue that very much.
So basically, can we say that the structure can be similar, right?
Well, not really, because I don't know the structure of the Jesuit order, but McKinsey's a partnership, and a true partnership, and the partners have always governed the firm. And you get elected a partner, and then you join a committee of one sort or another, and you contribute to the governance of the institution. And I think that's one of the things that's always made McKinsey a particular kind of consulting firm. It was a partnership. You know what the word partnership means in English. It was a true partnership, and it always has been. I'm not, it's probably been a little bit eroded over the years because it's become bigger and more international and so forth. But the notion that it is a partnership and the firm is owned by all the partners is at the root of their success, I would argue.
To understand and compare how Bower was brought up and how students are brought up today, what do you think has changed in teaching over the past 70 years in Harvard Business School? I understand that 3 generations have passed. He studied in the beginning of 19th. And what has changed in the very structure of teaching, maybe in educational programs?
2 things. I mean, obviously there are different courses, some different courses today than there were then. There's more emphasis on international business. When Marvin was there, if I can't remember the exact time, and it was before I got there, but I think that the business, there was nothing wrong with international business, but it wasn't the focus was on running a business, and the idea is you could run a business in America, okay? And so I think one thing that's changed is our students and our curriculum have become more international. I think the other thing, though, is that when Marvin was the early case studies and the early teaching by the case method was, I guess I would call it inductive or deductive learning. The students were expected to learn from the discussion of the situation, okay? And there were not many external concepts in the curriculum at that time. Over the years, that's changed. And that's changed since Marvin was there, I think. If you look at courses in marketing, there are specific concepts, or courses in strategy, or courses in my field of organizational behavior. So it's not quite as, while the case method goes on, the learning is less deductive than it may have been at that time.
How would you characterize the relationship between McKinsey and Harvard Business School? Are they partners, maybe like-minded structures, or is it a single structure that's divided on 2, theory and practice?
I think there's no connection really, other than a lot of our alumni. A lot of our alumni went to work at McKinsey, and a lot of the McKinsey partners are Harvard Business School alumni. But over the years, that was true, probably, much more true in the early days. But in the last 10 or 15 years, I don't know, McKinsey has partners from all kinds of universities, and they're not all MBA students any longer. MBA graduates, they're medical doctors, but lawyers who are McKinsey partners. It's a much more diverse group, both internationally, in terms of their national backgrounds and in terms of their education. So I think in the early days there was some commonality, but I think I haven't seen the statistics, but I think it's changed. McKinsey's had a partner who was managing partner who was from India, although he was a Harvard MBA, and he got himself in a lot of trouble. Other partners have come from other institutions, so I don't think there's certainly an affection between the 2 institutions, but I don't think you could think of it as one institution at all.
Very often in the post-Soviet space, the teaching staff is criticized for being theorists and teaching students the things which they really do not do in practice. If we look at the Harvard faculty today, who are these people? Are they theorists, scientists, businessmen? How would you describe them?
Well, I think our faculty has changed. I mean, there are a lot of us who were educated at Harvard, the business, we got our doctorates from our school. So we're kind of traditionalists. But over the years, I think we brought in a lot more people from other universities and with other kinds of educations. And I think that the whole tension, I think, is between those of us who are focused on the study of business and other people who've been trained in a discipline like economics or psychology or sociology or political science. And that's happening at other major business schools as well.
What do you think Harvard Business School lacks? Do you see any disadvantages today? Maybe in teachers, programs, or research institutes that should work, but they don't work?
Well, right now, there's a lot of problems because of the COVID virus and the kind of teaching we're having to do and all the rest of it. I think, I think what's changed the school as much as anything else is the fact we've got more international students and some international faculty. And I think, one of the questions any great institution like that has to earn, like Harvard, not just the business school, but the university, is are we an American institution or a global institution? And that, I think, there's no simple answer to that question. And clearly, the focus in the MBA program has become more global, more international, because business has become more global and more international. But that doesn't mean you can ignore your roots, which are truly American.
We can admire various contemporaries such as Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Bill Gates, but most of the experts with whom we spoke from the post-Soviet space, from Western Europe and the United States agree that all these people can be capitalists and rich people, but they are not equal to the genius of Marvin Bower, who actually managed to create something that didn't exist before. Besides, he gave birth and the way to life to the whole constellation of people whom we know well. In your opinion, why there is no people like Marvin Bower today? What has changed in the 21st century?
Well, I don't think that's accurate. I mean, if you just look at McKinsey, McKinsey's had a number of leaders since Marvin Bower. The partner who followed Marvin, the senior partner, was there for many, many years. And I think he had, in some ways, I won't mention his name, I won't embarrass him, but I think the point is he had skills as a leader, and he understood the values of the firm that he was leading, that he and some others who came after him and along with him really built the firm to its modern dimensions. When Marvin retired, McKinsey had just started internationally. What Marvin did, I think, was he created a way of managing and a way of understanding that the firm was a professional service firm, that it wasn't there to make money, but it was there primarily, but it was there to serve clients. And that ethos, I think, is something he left the firm. There are many stories about Marvin. One that I've heard was that they were having a meeting of the partners, must have been in New York. And at that time, I don't know, maybe there were 50 or 100 partners, I don't know. Marvin had retired by then, but he was sitting in the back of the room. And one of the younger guys who was, in the leadership of the firm was up on the stage making a speech about how as I recall the story, how McKinsey could make more profit. I mean, that was the presentation. And Marvin stepped up at the back of the room, walked all the way down to the room and said, how can a professional service firm be thought of as making a profit? That was kind of his question. The whole room was first very amused, but secondly, because he really struck a chord. That wasn't that McKinsey didn't want to make money, the firm or the partners, they certainly must have. But the thing he was emphasizing in his remarks, which I think got to everybody, was that the thing that's most important in this firm is how we serve clients. If we serve clients well and do that work well, we'll build our reputation, and in the end, I suppose you'll make money. That was what Marvin. It seemed to me that's what Marvin's proposition was. That was the way he thought about the firm. And the other guy that I was trying to think about, just for example, the partner I believe who followed Marvin, and the partners are elected by the partnership. You understand that? Okay. With Ron Daniels. Ron has been a partner for many, many years. I can't remember how long. And a wonderful guy. And I think Marvin, as much, probably even more than Bower, could step back and understand what it is that Marvin had started. So there were other outstanding leaders in the firm between those two guys. And there've been, since Ron, there've been other good people. So one of the things I think that's unique about this firm is that the people who are in the leadership of it, whether they're a partner or whether they're the managing partner or whether they're running an office or a practice, they all do share an understanding of what this firm is and what its values are and how they have to proceed. And that, I think, is very different. There are a few other firms like that. The Boston Consulting Group, Bain, to name two others that originated in the United States. They have their own set of values, but the guys who are running the firms understand what they're trying to do. And I think that's the difference between these few firms and a lot of other consulting firms, which have, become maybe too commercial, too focused, not focused enough on the client the client value, and so forth. You can tell I'm an admirer of those firms.
Thank you very much for your answers, Professor Lorsch. Can I ask you, please, what do you personally think about figure of Marvin Bower?
Well, I think one way to say it is he was larger than life. You had to meet the man to understand. Marvin was never, I didn't meet him that many times, but I saw him a lot at the school once, and he was not shy about expressing his opinions, and quite often his opinions were right. He was a great consultant because he could see the situation and think about what the potential solutions were. Consulting is not it's a science to some extent, but it's also an art. There's got to be intuition to see how you put together all these variables. And that's what Marvin was good at. I think that's what most of the people who've been good consultants, whether they be at McKinsey or one of the other consulting firms, the good ones, really, they know how to put it together, And I think the other thing that's important to understand is that Marvin saw the importance of developing people, bringing young people up into the organization. I mean, if you would have wanted to contrast and go to another profession, there are some really great law firms, for example, down in New York. What the great law firms have understood is part of what they've got to do is develop young people. They take the lawyers out of a law school and they turn them into professionals. And that's what McKinsey did. There's this standard of professionalism that Marvin reinforced that I think actually came from James McKinsey himself and others who passed, been there in between. And so I think that was Marvin's gift to the firm and really to consulting more broadly.
Thank you very much.
Sure. I mean, I'm not an expert in McKinsey. You should understand. When I was in the U.S. Army in Europe for 3 or 4 years, and when I came back to the United States, I was looking for a job, and I applied for a job at McKinsey, and they didn't hire me. So I've always laughed at that. I thought it was because I didn't have the right kind of hat. But anyway, no, I've always had admiration for the firm. In fact, when I was in the Army, I was with a group of young, what we call finance officers, fiscal people. And a number of them later went on to be partners at McKinsey. So I've had friends and known a lot of people at McKinsey. And I think they've hired good people. I mean, I think Marvin, I'm glad you're giving Marvin the credit he deserves. But I think there are some people at McKinsey who would say he did a great job, but he drove us nuts. You know what nuts means in that context? Drove us a little crazy. So he was a great person, and most great leaders are a little bit peculiar too. If you know what I mean.
Thank you very much for this conversation. It was very interesting, and the things that you shared that you cannot find in the articles or somewhere, it's very valuable.
I'm glad to talk to you, and you can tell I'm fascinated by the firm.